You either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And with summer coming to its final month, and because we have a theme for October and September now because of that too.
True.
Chris and I decided, well, more so Chris decided, we needed to do something from people's childhood summer. The classic that also coincides with Americans' favorite pastime, baseball. And if you have not guessed it already, we're talking about the Sandlot.
Kapoo! That's right.
What?
They spit a lot in this movie.
Oh, yeah, I know they did. Okay, I get it now. Yeah, for those that aren't familiar with this, Sandlot is about a new kid seeking acceptance from his stepdad and becomes friends with a group of kids who play baseball all summer long.
It is a intentionally nostalgic coming-of-age childhood fic that I think most people who, when this came out in 1993, a lot of people resonated very hard with it, and it became a cult classic very quickly. It also falls into the type of movie that I like to call American nostalgic that you typically hate, which is part of the reason I chose this.
It's not that I hate it, it just, I know I'm going to probably piss off a lot of people with this review, because I did not grow up with this movie. I'll put that out there right now. My mom even thought I had, but I have not. And it's just something that I don't have the same nostalgia for it, so I didn't really I knew of it and I'd seen pieces of it.
Sure.
But I did not fully see the Sandlot until this year. And on top of that, I bought Sandlot 3 first, not realizing it was the subtitle, subtitle. And there was 3 of these movies. So I only thought there was the one. So I ended up watching Sandlot 3, Sandlot 2, and then Sandlot 1. And I will tell everyone, I understand why you ignore 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And why this one stands out compared to those 2.
Sure, I think you fell for, honestly, the only marketing gimmick the other 2 movies had. The second one was direct to DVD, and I think they 100% were just hoping that people wouldn't notice the sub caption, because it's bad. The third one's worse, and that one also, like, people, I think, literally, there was no real marketing for it. They were just kind of hoping that people would fall into the trap that you did, where they go, oh, the Sandlot, I like the Sandlot. Wait a minute, this isn't the Sandlot. And too late, you're already watching the movie.
Yeah, no, I completely fell into that because, again, I didn't have any clue.
You are exactly who they were targeting with that marketing ploy. You were exactly the type of person who they were hoping would watch Sandlot 3 because they knew that it wouldn't be as good as Sandlot 1.
Yeah, it's something. With
that said, there was going to be more. They were going to have a sequel. It was announced in 2018, but it got nixed. And then in 2019, they were going to make Netflix TV series, but that also got nixed due to the writer's strike. So,
shocking.
For now, we only have these 3 beautiful treasures, but there has been regular talks of reviving the series. So maybe in our lifetime, we will see Sandlot 4.
And it'll piss off fans more than I will.
Probably, honestly. Because Sandlot 2 and 3 were pretty garbage.
Yeah. So, Sandlot is written by David McKinney Evans and Robert Gunter. It's directed by Evans. It stars Tom Greery as Scotty Smalls, Mike Vitter as Benjamin Franklin Rodriguez.
What a name.
And Art LaFleur as the Babe. And honestly, we could go through the whole list, but they have a bunch of weird names. Like, I get that it's supposed to be like old-timey baseball, like Hamilton Ham Porter, Michael Squints Paladeros.
Yeah.
Paladeros.
Yeah.
Alan Yaya McAllen, and Tommy Repeat Timmons. And then there's like 3 or 4 other characters that are just like, this is Ben.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so the movie came out in 1993, but it is written as if the story takes place in 1963. And
62.
Sorry, 62. And between the years 1960 to 1990, America's pastime really was baseball. People were obsessed with it. And so, like, the boys giving themselves, quote-unquote, baseball nicknames, which, I mean, these are pretty standard baseball nicknames. Hilarious. I never can remember their real names, which I think is kind of the point, because they all have honestly rather realistic names. Like, they have last names that, like, they're not the standard, like, Smith, Tim, McCullen, like, easy names, right? They have, like, more elaborate, realistic names. And so having a fun name does mean that I actually know who you are.
There's also like 10 of them, and you
There
only
is.
ever talk to like 3 of them.
That's true, but having the full set of boys present is important. So just kind of having like a rough idea of like the gang, I think is a huge part of why this movie resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah, and I can see that from the get-go before we really get into it, because, I played baseball for like 3 years as a kid, and my youngest brother played baseball for a long time too. And the baseball is a small part of the movie. It's about having that friend group, being that new kid.
Yeah.
And I can kind of understand that growing up in a military family where you always had that new kid, and sometimes they had a sibling, sometimes they didn't. But mine is a little different, where like different from this movie, where me growing up, my brothers were my best friends. So wherever I moved, my best friends moved with me. So I didn't have that lack of friendship ever. Sure.
And I think for a lot of people, the movie, at least from the people who I have listened to who also reviews this, because while I enjoy this movie, I was not a young boy who played baseball in the 90s and a very different like social dynamic in general.
Yeah.
Even with girls sports, like this isn't the dynamic that typically plays out. But listening to other guys talk about their growing up and like comparing it to this movie, even if they weren't baseball guys, even if they weren't, the new kid on the block, they could relate to young kid boy shenanigans that these kids get up to. They could relate to the over-the-top storytelling, which I think is why, and like they phrased it so much better than I did when I pitched this movie to you, because a lot of them compared this to the Christmas Story of summer.
You pitched this movie to me, and I'm like, oh, so it's just like Stand By Me, but with less dead bodies.
Yeah, actually it is.
No. I think they're completely different, but like I get your sentiment of like it is that summertime boyhood movie.
It is, and I've already tortured you once with watching A Christmas Story, which is honestly a similar vibe, but much longer.
Which we haven't actually reviewed, but you've still made me watch it.
I did make you watch it, so you have suffered once. I figured we could round out, and you have suffered the other end of the spectrum.
I guess. Well, I mean, we're here, so
here.
It's not changing. But before we get into it, I couldn't find a special feature or like any special DVD version of this, so I did not do any research on this. Plus, I didn't have time because I had family coming to town, so...
No worries. There's a handful of interviews that came out after the second movie came out that I have watched and listened to. A lot of the guys who played in this were interviewed again when the TV series in 2019 was announced. They were all going to come back for that. So a lot of them gave their sentiments and thoughts about it. They had some very fun insight remembering what it was like to play in the movie. But yeah, special feature-wise, I'm kind of shocked. This is a cult classic. It was popular even when it came out. We knew that the DVD was going to be part of it. And for some reason, despite all these years, there is no great, collector's edition of this movie.
Yeah, and I think that also kind of works with these kind of movies where it's not so much the making of that matters, it's the feelings that originally came from it, so there's not the need to know all the behind-the-scenes stuff that happened and whatnot.
Sure, I was just kind of shocked that there wasn't more interviews, especially since most of the boys, who are now men, grew up and still have fond memories and are willing and open about talking about it. They were willing to come back and make a version as they're all adults. So I was just kind of surprised that there wasn't a 57th anniversary special deluxe interviews only, gold platinum edition. We see those pretty often where the only thing different is an interview with them as an adult. I kind of would have liked that.
I mean, the movie's almost 30 years old. Well, no, it's a little over 30 years old at this point.
We could have had a 30th edition.
Yeah, they did the 25th for E.T. and whatnot too.
Oh yeah, no, it's fairly common, and so I was a bit surprised, especially since while this is an American film and it is based very heavily around what it is like to be the youth in America, this film was popular overseas. It was popular in both Britain and very popular in Australia. However, it wasn't called The Sandlot. It was called The Sandlot Kids because they were worried that people wouldn't know what a sandlot is.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't
know
what a sandlot
even Americans
was,
don't.
really.
Yeah, even Americans don't know what a sandlot is. It was originally going to be called The Summertime Boys, one of the directors said. However, the Summertime Kids.
Okay, I was going to say The Summertown Boys sounds like some gay porno of the Summertown Boys.
It kind of. But apparently there is also a baseball book that was very popular that is also named The Summertime Kids or Boys. I can't quite remember. And so they were like, they're both baseball and they're both about, like, boys growing up with baseball. You can't name it the same. So they went with The Sandlot.
That makes sense. Because otherwise it also sounds like a teenage girl movie of like, ooh, the Summertime Boys.
I mean, parts of this movie. They wish. But yeah, no, it was something that I found several times with some British reviewers and several Australian reviewers questioning the name The Sandlot, and I would like to make it very clear that the American children also did not comprehend what a sandlot was. It was just the name of the movie until we watched the movie.
And nowadays, with their Game Boys and their Nintendo cell phones, they don't know what outdoors are.
You say that, however, the Sandlot, like the actual lot that this was filmed in, still there, still a dirt lot with children playing. Hasn't changed at all.
Interesting.
I kind of figured they like had built like a McDonald's on it, because that happens a lot in these movies that we review. Like, oh, the site that this was filmed in is now a Costco. The
Witch's Hill on Salem is now a gas station.
Yeah.
Or whatever the hell it is.
I think it's a Walgreens.
Something like that.
Yeah. But that's normally how it goes. But no, I mean, it's set in San Francisco Valley, but it was fully filmed in Midville, Salt Lake City, and Ogden, Utah. And for the most part, all of the places that are, like, shown in the movie, they're still there and they're not changed much, including the pool, which my source is, which is Google, and it's probably not very accurate because I Google Street Viewed it. I think the only real change to the pool from this movie is just they've added a slide.
Interesting.
Could be wrong. Again, I just Google Street Viewed it. But...
Hey, I use Google Street View relatively frequently because it's better than the Google Maps view.
I agree completely.
Yeah. So, before we get into it, Chris, what are we drinking today?
Well, despite the movie being strongly on Mexican Coke, which I agree.
Or just regular Coke at the time, back with the actual sugar.
Real cane sugar, yes, which would be the best. I am a Diet Coke fanatic, and so Diet Coke it is.
And I'm old, and I have had too much regular Coke over the week. So.
We don't need more sugar.
Cheers.
Cheers. Delicious.
It's Diet Coke.
They all taste different. As a Diet Coke fanatic, I can confirm that the small Diet Coke in my car tastes wildly different than the 2-liter that you buy.
It'd be better with bourbon, and I wish I was a little boozed up for this one.
You know what? So a lot of the adults in this movie also, I think, would be in the same boat as you.
So, The Sandlot. We open up on some dude in a stadium, obviously press or some announcement crew, setting up baseball's greatest moment for him, that it wasn't any of the legends, but a personal legend and his close personal friend. Very much heavily setting up that nostalgia, and that this movie's going to be a flashback movie, which that's the thing. I know I bitch about flashbacks, but if that's the whole premise of the movie, that's fine. I hate it when it's in between flashbacks of here's real life.
Sure.
Here's a little flashback.
Oh yeah, no, this is a very clean, like, it all is in the past, like, oh, remember the good old days. I think it works especially good for a nostalgia movie, because for a lot of the nostalgia movies, we know it's meant to be a flashback, but they never show it as one. It's just like the narrator as an adult reminiscing.
Mm-hmm. And we get some narration from him, so there's a little interjection from the future.
Which I like this style better, like really showing them as an adult and like how this impacts, like we already get a little taste of how this impacted their life, which is great because it makes all of the child brain over the topness that we're going to get to feel less like dumb stylization and more of like truly looking through their storytelling.
Oh no, and I completely get that. I mean, I've been doing a little bit of, I guess, kind of soul searching / looking at my past as I'm getting older. But I wouldn't be in architecture if it wasn't for Pokemon.
Sure.
So I owe a lot to Japanese media earlier than I ever anticipated, so.
Perfect.
Another country that loves baseball.
That's true. I think maybe more than, I hate to say, I think maybe more than us.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
I mean, don't be wrong, we go hard, but we don't have a song and dance for every single player, every single play.
Interesting. I don't follow any of it. So.
I have a friend who like tried to explain it to me once, and I was like, "That sounds intense," and she's like, "It is." The
last video I saw of Japanese baseball was one of their wives was dancing in the stands, and they're like, "Look at her go!" It's like,
but I guarantee you, it was a choreographed dance, and literally every fan was also doing something.
No, it was just her. No. I saw the video. It was her just dancing in the stands, trying to embarrass him.
Look at her go! Yeah, no, my friend was like, I was trying to just eat at a bar that serves like some fried food and stuff because they were on vacation, And she's like, everyone in the bar was watching the game, and they all knew the songs, they all knew the dances. We could barely get food.
Jesus. But back to America.
Yes.
We cut to the summer of 1962, and we're introduced to Smalls, the outsider, at the end of 5th grade, very much setting up a traditional fish out of water story. Sad backstory and hardships of childhood, trying to connect with his stepdad, calling him dad, and then eventually Bill, which...
Yeah, I know, but I also don't care anything about Bill.
No, but Bill's not important to it. It's the way that Smalls starts with trying to call him dad.
Yeah.
To like, hey, accept me. I'm now kind of your kid now, and then calls him Bill.
Yes.
And it's also it sets up the importance of baseball to the kid, where he's not interested in baseball per se, but he's interested in it because the only male figure in his life currently is into baseball.
True, yes. It's very much a social thing.
Yeah, he actually really could have used, coincidentally, that came out the same year, 1993's My Real Family, a child's book about living in a step family.
Honestly, yeah, there's a lot of just... This family is a bit of a mess, and baseball really saved them, is kind of the moral of this story.
Saved him. Doesn't
did.
save his dad at all. His dad is like in like 1 or 2 more scenes, and then we never see stepdad.
That's true. He does get a pretty dope baseball out of it, though.
Yeah.
So.
And for those unfamiliar, the reason I bring up that book is because it is from a series of books called The Hurts of Childhood, with one outlier, How to Talk to Your Child About Satanic Ritual Abuse.
Yeah, I figured that was the one you were going with.
Yeah. It's from that same line of books.
Yes, it is. I think maybe the other ones were taken a little bit more seriously.
Hey, the other ones are still in print. Don't make me go back, Mommy is very expensive now, and I'm glad I interlibrary loaned it back in college.
Yeah, I think maybe it's time for a rework of children's books. I think we've got some new insight on how to do child psychology. But for this movie in 1962, the answer is baseball.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now we're introduced to the Sandlot, where we're told that they all just play, and it sets up that Smalls is their missing link. He's going to be the 9th player.
Yeah. I love, though, that Smalls goes to meet his new friends in the nerdiest outfit known to man.
Yeah.
His well-pressed khakis, his shirt tucked neatly into his belted pants, and a hat with the longest brim known to man.
Because he's a fucking nerd.
He is a fucking nerd.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's like his nice outfit, so he's clearly trying to, like, do what his mom said, like, oh, wear your nice clothes, you want to make a good impression.
Yeah.
And
or no, I mean, that's just how he dresses. He doesn't have any other option.
That's true.
His mom's dressed him as a nerd.
His mother has dressed him as a nerd.
At that age, you have almost no say in what you're wearing. It's what your mom thinks is going to be cute.
And I do think part of this is left over from the original script. So the original script, they weren't going to be about 13-ish. They were going to be much younger.
Okay.
Like,
like Little Rascals level?
Again, maybe not quite that young, but yeah, they were aiming more for the 8 to 10 year range.
Oh, I don't know how old the Little Rascals are then. That's another one of those childish, quote-unquote nostalgic movies that I've never seen, and I know I'm going to hate it.
You will hate it. All versions of it. It's been remade several times. It also was a book and I think a comic for a while. Okay, so the Little Rascals, much like Dennis the Menace, the children's age is a little bit wider and more ambiguous, because A, working with children is a big pain and like doesn't always work out, so the older the child, the easier it is to work with them. But also you want to have some of those sweet, like, really young kid moments, so you're dressing down, right?
Yeah, no, I have found out that to one of our friends' kids, I am Wizard Nicho.
Wizard Nicho, that's a great name.
Yeah, because I hit a ball behind my back.
Wow.
And it made it appear out of the ether.
Well, now you gotta learn magic tricks.
Unfortunately, yes. Now I have set that up for myself.
Let me know if you want any easy beginner ones. That was one of the summer camps I did as a youth.
Yeah, I already put a staff and wizard code in my Amazon cart.
So. Perfect. A good start. I can teach you how to pull coins out of a bag later. But I think this is leftover, like, his goofy dress, I think is very much left over from the earlier right, where they were looking for more, like, younger kids, not, like, kids starting their, like, teenage years.
Yeah.
And so, like, having him, like, his mom dress him and, like, this level of goofiness, while I do think still, like, works and, like, it's played up a bit, I think this is like one of those instances where like he could have gone in much more normal outfits and the point would have still been made.
Well, I don't think so as much because it's such a contrast from what the kids or what the other kids are wearing.
True.
What it does is it really sets him up as 100% at this point an outsider. And on top of that, it sets up that he's searching acceptance. If he can't get it from his stepdad, the Sandlot is now offering him this potential opportunity with all the other ragtag group of kids who probably don't fit in elsewhere either.
Some of them definitely do. Squints was the bottom man on that totem pole until Smalls showed up, and we all know it.
Well, the only one who's there that probably is any popular is Ben. Everyone else is kind of on that level of like, they look nerdy, but they're not into nerd shit.
True. I do think they played up the characteristics a little bit just because it's a kid and that's how kids remember stuff.
Yeah, it's also a kid's movie, so you're going to make caricatures that kids can relate to. That's why they have that large cast of characters, is so that way one kid can be like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me.
And that's exactly what the reviewers that I was listening to said. Like, a bunch of these guys who grew up with this movie regularly would mention in their reviews, even if they were trying to do a very straight, like, academic review, they'd be like, and I related most to fill-in-the-blank character, because that kid looked like me, or he talked like me, or he dressed like I did. And so clearly it worked. Clearly having this wide cast of caricatures, even if, like, half of them only have a good one-liner every once in a while, clearly it was, like, a good move.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, that's how you make a good movie for kids, is you cast a wide enough net while keeping the main, I'll say probably trio, because honestly, Ham is still kind of a bigger part compared to some of the other kids, but he's still not Ben or Smalls.
Definitely.
Also in this, we get the setup of stuff that's going to come later on down the line, the setting up of the dangerous beast over the fence. There's a bit of cheesy knocking of him getting knocked out while still wanting to fit in because he runs off because he's not really part of them still. He's still that kid who just kind of showed up in the outfield.
That's true. He is just standing there.
Yeah.
While they're doing baseball drills.
Well, and it's also setting up, like, the scary things for kids is the things you don't know and don't understand. Because that fence is, as far as they know, there's only that one hole in it. And there's a dog that chews up their ball that is over there.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But also, there's an interesting setup that I think there's a good setup with this, where he tries to throw the ball, which shows he knows nothing about baseball. His stepfather obviously isn't teaching him. So there's a little bit of parental neglect there, or maybe not neglect. They just moved to a new place. I'm sure the father's trying to adjust to whether they move for work or something. But at the same time, it shows that maybe there's been other stuff happening that his stepdad's not really there. Well,
and also I think because it's a movie from the kid's point of view, right? And he's not sure how to handle having a stepdad just yet. I think the movie leads a lot of adults, and this is something that I think when you rewatch it as an adult without the, like, nostalgia goggles, it's something you catch. I don't think the stepdad is truly that terrible of a person. I think maybe what happened was he was like, well, this kid's not into baseball, and it's kind of the only thing I'm into. I guess once we move, we can, like, try and figure out what he is into, like, books? You know, like... How do you, like, if the one thing that you're into, your kid's never shown any interest in, until suddenly he's like, actually, I've just made 8 new friends and I need to learn baseball ASAP.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same thing, too, because we do see that Smalls is, even though he's not initially into it, he's still trying to learn. I mean, he goes back home and it shows that he's more of a nerd because he's taking notes from the day of the Babe. Still don't know who that is, but the Babe.
But I also think this is a really great, like, introduction to the different interests in sports. America, especially more recently, it's harder to recognize that, like, you can just be interested in the stats or the, like, players. You don't have to be, like, also into playing the sport.
Well, and that's the thing with, like, movies about sports. I don't really care for movies where the sport's the main thing.
Yes.
My more favorite sports films, because I do watch some now and then, are, like, Mystery Alaska, where it's more about the drama, or the Japanese flick, I Will Buy You. That's all about the drama of recruiting and...
Yeah, like the behind-the-scenes bits.
Exactly, where baseball isn't the focal point of everything.
And
like Real Steel.
Real Steel's a good example.
Technically a boxing movie.
I think a lot of the, like, truly great ones, it's more than just the sport. And I think, even though The Sandlot is, like, more about coming of age and making friends, showing off that, like, in the end, it doesn't have to be only one way of enjoying something that makes you friends and, like, gives you a passion in life.
Yeah.
You can do it in a bunch of different ways. It's really smart. Doing it, like, especially planting that sort of, like, a thing in his brain from the beginning really pays off at the end when we see him finally, like, at the end being his announcer self.
Yeah, or at the very beginning, because we know...
Exactly, we know he's going to be an announcer.
Yeah, we know that this is going to be influential on his life, where that ends up being his career.
Exactly.
/ how do we get to that point? Which is, I think that's a lot of issues people have with prequels, but when the movie's not dependent on the previous film, or a previous example of or part of the story, that's what's great. And I think that's why the simple introduction of, like, him being an announcer is great, or journalist. We don't know 100%. He's just part of the bigger leagues at this point.
Yeah.
And so is Ben, as far as we know.
Exactly.
But also in this scene, we do get a little bit from his mother, because that's the thing. This movie is about the kids. The parents are barely involved.
They really are.
But we can see his mother's influence on really encouraging him to break out of his box. And I get that. I was a very in-my-box kid up until sometime in high school or college, as I feel a lot of us really awkward kids were. That's the same thing that can be said for Smalls. He's a very awkward kid.
Yeah, looking at that hat really just says it all.
Yeah, and I mean, we really even get, like, how much baseball is in part of his world is his cereal box has baseball on it.
Yes, it is everywhere. Yeah. It is the cool kid thing.
And even the mother has to prod the stepdad into teaching him.
Yeah, I do wish, like, I get it. Like, the way they show it, like, there has to be some level of tension, and for a kid's movie, this is a good level of tension, because, like, in the end, we don't really care what happens to the, like, parents, because it's focused so heavily on them, but having that level of, like, I don't know, discourse between everyone really kind of helps hammer home why he is out at the Sandlot instead of hanging out at home. Yeah,
well, I think that's important too, because this is, if I remember right, this is the last scene we really see the parents in at all, because Smalls feels like a chore to teach him how to play baseball, and I do like some of the cinematography in this where it feels a bit too bright, where it's slightly overexposed for those childhood memories, where it's like, this could have been a childhood memory of learning to play catch with your stepdad.
Sure.
And I do kind of wonder if this is how my dad felt trying to teach me baseball, because I was never good at baseball. Let's be honest. I was enrolled for like 3 seasons of it, and when we moved back to the States, and I never played it again.
Yeah, well, you had some activity time where they went, yep, good enough.
I don't have very good hand-eye coordination, and I just...
That's okay. You had your activity, you made friends.
Yeah. Well, and we get a little bit of tough love from the stepdad of him trying to, like, teach him. I mean, I had the same thing too. My dad tried to teach me not to get into the box by hitting me in the side of the face with a baseball.
Yeah, you know, like everyone does.
Yeah. I mean, it is a good way to learn that, hey, don't do this again.
That's true.
But at the same time, like, Smalls is such at a basic level that...
This poor kid can't even catch.
Yeah, or throw the ball to save his life.
No, poor thing.
Yeah. And from there, we get Benny dragging Smalls out to join them, which I think that's what's great about Ben's character, or Benny, yeah, that's his name, or what they call him, is that he's one of those guys who you go to school with, who's as we can see, Benny is popular.
Yeah.
And we see later on he could have been potentially popular because he's so good at baseball.
True.
But he's hanging out with the misfit kids, which it seems like maybe at some point it was 1 or 2 of them. Maybe they weren't like the full childhood group that we see now.
Yeah.
And so he's bringing Smalls into the group, trying maybe, and I don't think it's a selfish thing where they need a 9th player.
True.
But it's just that opportunity to have someone else and have a full game to play without keeping score and just having fun.
Oh, no, I think definitely. I think Benny also is kind of like a childhood reminiscence on the idea of like that a little bit older kid who like was really nice and let you hang out with them. And like and in this case ended up being very good friends once they got older. But the way Benny is written is so over the top, like almost teachery. But it works out because you have all these other guys who are range from just being like kind of sort of supportive to just downright mean at times.
Yeah, Ham's an asshole.
Ham is an asshole. And so like having that one character, even if he wasn't like the leader of the group, but having that one character who is like fully on your side helps balance out all of the other stuff, even if it's like really like childhood memory sort of way of writing. I think it ends up balancing out and like working.
Well, it works too because when we do get to see them hanging out at that convenience store, they're all being kids trying to play a little bit of adult where they're spitting because they're imitating the people they've seen, the chew and everything. Or they don't have chew at this point, but they're imitating like they are having chew. And they all are... It feels like they're really trying to mimic each other and trying to be be the manly baseball guy. And
Definitely.
it reminds me of, it never goes full Little Rascals trying to be adults, because that's the thing that annoys me with my brother. Well, me and my brother, who, him and his friends had something similar where they learned how to one-hand clap in high school. And you'd say, hey, show me a one-hand clap. And one would do it, and then like 4 others would pop up behind them.
And they look so stupid when they do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember it well.
But, like, the Little Rascals, that's what pisses him and I off so much, is when they put children in movies where they're pretending to be adults.
Yes. Yeah, no, this is, I think, a very good representation of teenage boys doing and being teenage boys. And the director talks a little bit about in one of the interviews how, like, some of it was just the boys being themselves without a ton of direction. Part of the reason why he agreed to age up everyone was because he thought that they would be able to improvise just a little bit better. And some of it clearly is like them like riling and playing off of each other.
Yeah.
And it works really well because it adds to that like natural feeling of like this being a group of friends. They always hang out, they always try and one up each other, they're always being a little bit extra.
Yeah, well, and they're also hesitant to have someone new come into the group because they're all hyping up Benny while putting down Smalls.
Definitely.
And this is where Benny really comes in as a true leader and showing why potentially might be down the line a better baseball player or captain of a team.
True.
Because he's patient and accepting. And it's also setting up the big fish in a small pond that Benny is at this point.
Yeah, true.
And just how this whole group just looks up to him as...
Oh yeah, no, he's the older boy in the group. He's the cool kid.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then also on top of that, I think what's important about Benny is that once they do go back to the Sandlot, he's teaching Smalls that's about having fun and to stop trying to overthink it, which I completely understand because that's how I am. I overthink stuff. That's why I'm not super good at sports is I think too much.
True. But I do think it is hilarious that Benny's like reason for having these boys out every single day doing drills, I mean, essentially just baseball practice, right? It's like they're not even just like playing a fake game each day. Like he's got them doing full on practice. It's because Benny loves it. And he's just found a group of guys who'll like play along with him.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Exactly. And I mean, it's a good writing of a male friend group. You all give each other shit once you're in together. You all have that one friend who hops on and you mercilessly bully them, but you do it out of love.
True. And I think this is a like great example of like Squints is talking big game, but we all know Squints was the piss on before Smalls showed up. Like there's no way that he was not bottom rung. And so him like talking big game, I think is mostly just him getting like the frustration out of being like the like bottom guy for a while.
Yeah, well, it's established because Smalls really doesn't know anything. He doesn't throw the ball. He runs the ball to the baseman.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, so Squints is at least a little bit better than Smalls at playing.
Yeah, that's true.
But we do get the little bit where this is where Benny comes in and he's teaching Smalls, hey, here's some advice, here's a chance to do this. And him catching the ball while being cheesy in slow motion.
Yeah.
It gives him credit to be like, okay, well, maybe there is hope for this kid. And I think, and while usually I'm not a huge fan of like slow motion or this over dramatic acting, I think it works for The Sandlot because it's a movie from a kid, it's a memory of your childhood.
Yes.
And children, as I am learning, are very over dramatic.
Yes, they are.
And so
very much. No, I agree. And I think it is done a little bit cheesy, but I think because the whole movie has about the same level of nostalgic overtones, which I think The Christmas Story also has. I think The Christmas Story is just crazy long. And so you get bored of it very quickly. This one's not. This is a very normal amount of movie time. And so like the over cheesiness of a couple of scenes, the over drama of certain like big events like catching the ball or coming up the swimming pool scenes, Yeah, they're cheesy, but they feel like the way you would tell a big story about, like, remembering what it was like as a kid.
Yeah, the giant shadow of the dog in the background.
Exactly.
And even then, after they're done playing, Benny is still trying to help Smalls, where he gives him advice on how to dress to fit in with the gang, to be one of them.
Yeah.
And even gives him his glove and hat to, like, hey, or no, he gave him that in the last scene.
Yeah, but at least he doesn't have that plastic glove anymore.
Yeah, but we finally see Smalls seeming to be happy.
Yeah.
But still overthinking at home because he's writing down notes of how to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, but I'm glad that they never, like, push that out of his character. Like, they keep building on it, because I think if, like, clearly we know that he goes into sports but not as a player.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important skill to have. Like, that's an important passion to have, to be able to, like, take stats, to be able to, like, read a play quickly and be able to, like, narrate it.
Yeah.
So, like, this is great that they're, like, incorporating that skill early on. And yeah, they're addressing it as, like, well, look at how nerdy this kid is. But, I mean, eventually it pays out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did record keeping for some of the softball at the military base when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get it. I think that stuff's interesting, just the sport itself is not my favorite. Although I will say, I have been to like 2 or 3 baseball games in the last couple of years, and they are implementing rules that are making it much faster and more interesting to watch instead of sitting
agree.
for 2 minutes watching a dude
Talk
fake
about it.
throwing a ball.
I agree. The new rules have improved the watchability.
Yes. But from here, we cut to a montage of a fun day, and I like how they do build this stuff up, is because from one scene to the next, it's not like, well, this happens because we just wanted it to happen.
Yeah.
It's just them having fun until Ham fucks it up and forces the plot of a new ball, which comes down later.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of how obnoxious kids are. And I might just be an old man, but I find the antics of this just stupid. But I mean, I get it. I was a kid like then too, so I might just be a grumpy old man bitching about it.
I think the idea, though, is that, like, when you are young, when you're, like, a high schooler or a young person, like, the antics that they get up to are meant, like, you still feel fun, and then as you get older, you're like, wow, how stupid. But that's kind of the point, isn't it? Like, you're supposed to eventually relate with the grumpy old people in this movie. Yeah,
well, the ball going over the fence is also it's not only used later on as a way to push the plot and force Smalls to take action, it's also a way to finally introduce the lore of the Beast.
Yes. And the Beast was played by a real English Mastiff. I could not find its name. I am so sorry. However, the Beast was not just the English Mastiff. They had several, like, pretty cool looking props and a few robots to make the Beast look like the terrifying monster that the children remembered. Partially because the English Mastiff that was hired was incredibly friendly, and they could never get it quite, like, spooky enough.
Yeah. Well, and that I think that works well with it too, because that's kind of the cheesiness you see of, like, the paw grabbing the ball, and it's just like...
And then, like, the big jump shadow of it, like, its puppet mouth just swallowing the ball whole.
Yep. No, exactly. And it feels a little bit like Sid's Backyard from Toy Story, but with rockets and balls.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, it's cheesy, but it works. And it leads to another summertime tradition of having your camp out in the tree house.
Yes, telling scary stories.
Where we get Killing Me Smalls because he doesn't know shit. And that's the important thing, is he never figures out who the fuck the babe is until it's way too late. And I don't even think he still understands who the babe is until he's an adult.
I fully agree with you. I do not think at any point in this movie, until he is an adult, does he truly know who the babe is. I think he just learns the full name and, like, quickly reads up about him while he's at school and is like, famous baseball player, full name. Okay, now I got it, I'll fit in. And it's like, no, you don't actually know. You haven't like watched any of the home runs or anything, clearly.
No, not at all. And also the building of the Beast, I love it because it's a good childlike telling of an urban legend where it's like, it was about 20 years ago. And
like the dog is not even 20 years old.
Yeah. Well, the only reason they say 20 years is because they know it's older than them.
Yeah.
And also it's a black and white child story of the unknown.
Yes.
Where the dog killed about 122, about 173 guys before the cops finally took action.
And like, in child logic, the dog is not, like, removed in any way. They just, like, are like, can you please keep your monster man-killing dog chained up?
Yeah.
In this backyard.
And even then, it's all it's all to explain why that yard is a fortress.
Yes. And, like, at no point does it, like, come up in the story about, like, oh, the owner of the dog is, like, this sort of... No, it's so focused on the dog that these boys haven't even considered, like, talking to the owner of the house to be like, can I get my ball back? No, they're so focused on the dog.
Yeah, no, because the timeline of their punishment is forever.
Forever.
And honestly, Smalls is right in expecting them to be bullshitting him, because that's exactly what they've done to him for the past 30, 40 minutes of the movie.
That's true. No, like, the whole time he's known them, they have bullshitted to some extent, even if they were having fun.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's a fun little scene to build up the lore around the Sandlot.
I think it's really great, especially knowing how friendly the actual dog from the movie is, and why, like, all of the chase scenes aren't, like, the dog really chasing. It was more of, like, the dog being tempted with treats, or being asked to walk across the table. Yeah. And it's a Mastiff, so he's, like, always looks a little droopy, because that's just how their face is.
Yeah, it's adorable.
He was very sweet, apparently.
I mean, that's how it seems outside of horses, like Del Toro's rant on the horses, or chickens from Pan's Labyrinth.
I do think it depends on who you ask, though, because several times the different cast from Lord of the Rings fell in love with the horse, and if I remember right, a few of them took him home.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it depends on if you're a horse person or not.
I think maybe I just align with Del Toro's dislike of horses.
It's okay. You know who else doesn't like horses? Snoop Dogg. He requires Martha Stewart to be there if he is to be around horses, because she's his emotional support human when it comes to those terrifying beasts.
Fascinating.
Snoop Dogg, not a fan of horses. Kind of likes dressage now, though, because Martha Stewart explained it to him as them, like, crip walking.
Oh, no, I saw that where he's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they made him go to the Olympics. He was like, not without Martha.
Well, didn't he watch that with Kevin Hart?
Maybe. This year he definitely was there with Martha, though.
Okay.
They had little outfits and everything. It was very cute.
I don't follow any of that shit.
It's okay. It was all I did while the Olympics were on was, like, watch it endlessly streaming.
Anyway, back to the Sandlot. The next day we are introduced to Wendy Patterson when they're getting their new ball. The one hot adult that all the kids have feelings for.
And I think this also helps why they aged up the boys a little bit. Like, boys having crushes, nothing new under the sun. Having teenage boys have especially, like, early in their teenage years, boys have crushes. The dumb things that one can write about. Endless. You can now have these boys do anything for the hand of fair Wendy.
Yeah, the 18-year-old.
Well, yeah. Probably, I mean, at least 16 because she works as a lifeguard.
No, they say she's 18.
They say she's 18. Okay, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Wendy's just enjoying watching these idiots make fools of themselves.
I don't think she's enjoying it.
So I think this is a moment where we see things through the boys' point of view. Like, all of the fun little teasy, like, smiles and winks and stuff that Wendy supposedly does. I think that's totally in the boys' head. I do, as a previous lifeguard, I will say, watching children make fools of themselves because they think you're cool, top tier entertainment.
I have never looked up to a pool guard.
Some of them will jump off the high dive, belly first, straight into the water, hoping to win your approval. And I'm like, no, but that looks like it hurt.
Was that influence from this movie? Because, I will say the pool scene is the only scene that I remember seeing as a kid. Not even the full pool scene, just
the jump?
No, just the makeout.
Oh, sure, the classic portion.
Yeah.
I don't think it was fully from this movie. I think it was in a culmination of a few things.
Okay.
But I do think that the way this movie puts it together is by far the most seamless and, like, the most time classic version of, like, children's interpretation of pool.
Yeah.
You know? But, like, I mean, pool, endless, timeless.
Well, and I think you are right on with it is 100% from the kid's eyes, because the narrator, or Smalls, says that they had nothing to fear of talking to girls as a kid. And it's like, well, I don't believe you in that, but maybe if that's how you remember being a kid.
I think that's how he remembers being a kid, for sure.
Well, and maybe I remember this shot as a kid, because there's a lot of down the shirt shots of Wendy.
This is very much from the boy's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, as a young boy, if I had seen that as a kid, I would have appreciated that, even though I wouldn't know what the ideas meant at the time.
Oh, no, it's so far in their, like, head that, like, Wendy is this goddess of the pool that, like, they're like, oh, she wears the red bathing suit. Yeah, all the lifeguards wear red bathing suits, you numbnuts.
Yeah, Pamela Anderson pioneered it.
Yes. No, well, no, it's always been red. Red's easy color to spot in the water.
Yeah.
But, like, they're so obsessed with Wendy that they don't even contemplate that the swimsuit that they're, like, crazy that she's wearing, they're like, oh my god, she's wearing the swimsuit again. She's just wearing her pool lifeguard uniform.
My family's so obsessed with Wendy's jokes. Yeah, I can't take that scene seriously at all now.
I understand.
But I do think it's a fun scene because it gives them a reason not to be at the pool again because they kicked out Squint's now the ladies' man of the group.
True, and fun fact, so this movie suffered terribly from quote-unquote bad weather. It was filmed fairly quickly, so they didn't have a whole lot of time to, like, wait for something to be good, and being in Utah, the weather changes pretty dramatically. So all the outdoor scenes, most of the baseball scenes, it was well at the 100 or above degrees, and the boys were constantly, like, dripping in sweat, and they were kind of like, well, should we leave it? Should we keep it? And most of it they kept because they felt like it was pretty accurate for boys to be sweaty and gross.
Yeah.
The pool scene was the one day that it was, like, 60 degrees.
Oh, jeez.
And if you watch the background, like, half the boys' teeth are, like, full chattering. But you don't notice it because, like, Wendy's doing such a good job of pretending to, like, be the beautiful icon, putting on sunscreen. And,
yes,
like, but
very distracting with her assets.
Yes, but it's also, like, why half of the, like, backup people are, like, beach lounging as opposed to, like, everyone swimming. It's because it was freaking cold.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's how some of those movies are, especially, like...
Ten Commandments mud scene comes to my mind.
Yeah, that or... I don't know, Titanic was cold. I'm trying to remember.
Titanic was cold, and they knew it was cold.
Yeah, there was some other movie where it was the opposite, where they had to pretend it was warm.
Yeah, this one they were pretending
it was cold.
This one they were pretending the water was delightful and warm, but no, they were all freezing.
I bet. But from here we got more childhood nostalgia, the 4th of July game, which it's more so justice. I do have some questions about the scene, because I do think it is a good scene for this movie, especially going back as an adult. Mm-hmm. Because they're all out there just having fun. They are. And it keeps saying that Benny's set up for greater things, and it's because he's working when others shouldn't.
Yes. He's clearly passionate. And it brings up,
were they missing out on childhood for baseball? Because they stopped to watch the fireworks, but Benny's like, hey guys, we got to keep the game going. But I honestly don't think they're really missing out, because those are the memories that they remember. We're not remembering every single game of the Sandlot. We're remembering a handful of days that, at least through Small's eyes, that meant something. The first day meeting these guys, the first day being accepted, the story of the Beast, and now he's remembering the fireworks game.
Oh no, I think that while Benny is definitely portrayed as, like, a bit of a fanatic, you know, as far as baseball is concerned, like, he's got his group of friends out, and he didn't even want to go to the pool. He was like, no, we should keep practicing. They're like, Benny, it's like 100 degrees out here. We're going to the pool. Yeah, but
they all outvote him because they can't keep cool with their cokes.
But I do think that, like, this movie does a good job of really showing how, even though Benny is obsessed with baseball, like, he's clearly meant for bigger things because of the dedication and skill that he's got. He is willing to, like, spend time with his friends. Granted, he'd prefer to spend it baseballing. Mm-hmm. But if everybody else wants to, you know, stop and watch fireworks or go to the pool, well, yeah, alright, let's do it, sort of thing. And I think that adds to Smalls, like, idling of him, because it's pretty obvious that Smalls sees the hard work that Benny does. It's noted many times in the movie, like, from Smalls' point of view, like, wow, look at how much effort Benny's putting in. Benny's got us out here every day doing drills. He's the best one among us. But he also has all these memories of them just, like, hanging out. Yeah. Like, they're in the treehouse just telling stupid stories.
It'd be a completely different movie from Benny's standpoint.
I do think it would be, but I also think it would be, instead of a story about learning, like, to accept yourself and to, like, you know, find your confidence, I think it'd be more of a story of learning how to, like, balance that, like, passion with, like, making sure you have time for friends and everyone.
Yeah, and I don't think that would be as interesting as Small's story.
No, but I do think it was something that they were kind of hoping to do with some of the, like, later ones that were coming out, especially the third one with, like, the whole, like, time travel bullshit.
Fuck that one. Fuck that movie so much. But I think you do make a good point with that, too, because we do get more games, and Benny is outwitting all of the other kids in his own group.
That's true.
But now we get this weird, like, gang rivalry between the kids in in the uniform versus the ones in the rolled jeans with some really childish, you play like a girl.
Yeah, it's very kiddie, but like, I don't know. I don't think it's so stupid that it has lost anything. I think it's pretty timeless teasing. So I do think it holds up over all these years.
Yeah. Well, and it's a fun way to show that it's not just Benny who's better at baseball. They're all good at baseball. They just don't want to play for a team at that point. They're just kids enjoying their summer.
Yeah, they don't want to like have to practice, even though that's what they're doing every day.
Yeah, no, exactly. They're practicing through fun instead of Mr. Miyagi, or kind of Mr. Miyagiing it, but if you're a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
But nothing better than it's time for them to celebrate the defeat of the uniformed kids.
Woohoo.
Time to do legal drugs as kiddos.
Yeah, so the actual spit tobacco was made up of beef jerky and something else. So it's not like the kids obviously don't have a real one, but it was kind of like a gross combo. And so like that's kind of why none of the kids look super excited to be eating the tobacco.
But it works because it's not supposed to be good as a kid.
I also think that this is like a really good like subtle tie into like their idolization of all these big baseball players that Small doesn't have access. Like that's why he's like kind of confused on why they're so into it. All the baseball legends were into tobacco. Like, it was a huge problem. It still kind of is. And so, like, all of these guys are like, we are embodying our legends, who we admire. And Smalls is just like, well, if my friends are doing drugs, so am I.
The peer pressure. But here's why I think this works really well, is because them playing adults is how kids would actually do it. And It's not like, and I'm going to repeat this, and I know very little of this still, the Little Rascals.
Sure.
Where it's like they're playing adults as kids, but there's not like anyone that they're imitating. It's just, these kids are kind of adults for some reason.
The Little Rascals feels like adults writing children trying to act adulty, whereas this one is so much that like, well, what did I do when I was a kid? That's what I'm gonna write. Oh, my friends all smoked a cigarette and I did too, and we all turned green. That's what we did.
Yeah, it's no Baby Geniuses 2.
No, it's no Baby Geniuses 1 or 2.
Yeah, but it's a fun little scene to show them getting sick. The ride is disgusting.
The ride scene's so nasty.
But I do like that it's like their version of getting buzzed, because afterwards they're like, oh, I'm sticking to Bazooka.
Yeah, but like Bazooka was the like kid bubblegum like for baseball guys, and like they were trying so hard to be their legends with the chewing tobacco. It just didn't work out. They're not quite man enough just yet. But hopefully maybe this put them off of it.
Maybe. Drugs are bad. So.
Drugs are bad. Don't chew tobacco. That's how you lose your lip.
Oh God, I watched a movie because Diamondback Zero had me watch one called New Jack City that feels like a very anti-drug campaign. So.
Perfect. I love an anti-drug movie.
And this one doesn't go there, but it's a fun bit. And also we get a little bit of setting up Smalls as being the man of the house while his stepdad's out on business.
I do love that Smalls really feels like he has this like responsibility. When if you like take a step back and like remove the child narrative portion of it, he's really not doing a whole lot. He's just declaring himself. Like, if you need anything, Mom, I got you. And she's like, I do all your grocery shopping. Yeah. I wash your undies. Like, you're fine.
But it is a nice bit because, yeah, there's only this scene and another scene with the stepdad. I lied about the cereal scene. But it's a scene to be kind of like maybe his stepdad's accepting him a little bit. Maybe because maybe he saw him play baseball or something and understands that, hey, he's trying. I do think that, like, when you look at it from just the adult side of the, like, story and, like, remove that kid, like, storytelling aspect, I think it is like his stepdad clearly not knowing what to do with kids, especially like a young teen boy. I mean, like, well, what would I want to have been told when I was a kid? You're in charge while I'm gone. There, we're bonding. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's the closest he ever gets to his stepdad, because the movie is about his friends, not his relationship with his stepdad. I would argue the very end he does finally like understand his stepdad a little bit, but it takes someone else's. Another male figure in his life to really get him to see it. Yeah, well, it's because they fuck up and lose another ball because it explodes its guts out, which is supposed to be a good sign. Yes. But, and this is where Smalls is, I feel because Smalls is a little bit empowered by his stepdad saying, "Oh, you're the man of the house," and Smalls doesn't want the days to end.
No,
I think
he's finally feeling like he's in the groove.
Exactly. This is where he goes and steals his stepdad's ball that has Babe's signature on it.
The baby Ruth.
Yes, but it also does show that Smalls is. This scene also shows that Smalls has improved exponentially.
Yeah,
he actually can play with the other boys.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where, like, when you watch it as an adult, you think to yourself, like, oh, if one of my friends had, like, busted a ball that badly, I think we would have been, like, called it a day and been like, you know what? We deserve Cokes. Ice cold Cokes for that awesome feat. Let's continue on.
Yeah, no, exactly.
You know, as opposed to him who's like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. We gotta keep going. Mm-hmm. So instead of waiting for them to, like, gather up a few more quarters so they can go buy a ball.
Exactly. And that jubilation is short-lived because they knock it over the fence again.
To the Beast's lair.
And I think this is the part that I still don't like, this part where he still doesn't know who Babe Ruth is, and they're like, oh shit, that's my dad's ball. It was signed by someone called Babe Ruth, or the Babe.
Some girl put her name on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do think it's a little unlikely, but I also think that, like, the timeline of how quickly things have moved is maybe a little bit skewed, because this is all in Small's head, and Smalls also does kind of feel like the sort of kid to, like, forget to look at the obvious thing, like, who is Babe Ruth?
Yeah.
You know, so, like, I don't think it's too out of left field, and I do think it adds for some pretty good one-liners that a lot of, like,
You're killing me, Smalls.
Yeah, like, honestly, the one-liners in this movie are, I think, why people, like, remember it as much as they do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it does mean that some, like, people, like, remember it and, like, come back to it when they're an adult, because they have kept that one line in their head for so long. Yeah,
and I will say, from a writing standpoint, all the plot points come together.
They do.
In a nice hour to, like, really bond them together, because even though it's really Small's screw-up,
it is. They're all gonna try.
Exactly. They're all in on it to fix it.
Yeah.
And also, because I didn't know baseball, I was kind of curious. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that Babe died about
he died
15 years ahead of this at 53.
Yeah, he died kind of young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, getting another Babe Ruth ball, I now understand why, like, that was a bigger thing that this was missing.
Oh yeah, no, there's no asking him for to re-sign.
Mm-hmm. And I do also appreciate that while they're trying to get the ball back, it's heavily from that kid's point of view where the Beast is taunting them. He's left the ball out. Of course the Beast is wanting them to go into the yard so he can get them. Yeah, because it's not just a dog, it's the Beast still. Yeah. Yeah, and I know their contraptions are a little, like, unrealistic. I like it because it feels like an overtelling that you would do as an adult to be like, well, we had a contraption. The contraption was probably originally just, like, a stick. Yeah. With, like, maybe a basket zip tied to the end, but, like, as the story gets retold, you, like, add a few more gadgets, you add a little bit more engineering. It's a childish attempt at Mission Impossible-ing the ball. And honestly, a lot of these gadgets would have worked if they had just streamlined their communication just a little bit. Yeah. If they had skipped, like, two people, if one of them had just been like, go, and then they had done the thing, probably would have succeeded. But I do think that it's a lot of fun watching them trying to, like, Mission Impossible it. No, well, and I think what's great about this scene, too, is this is where Small's expertise comes in from the previous scenes that we've seen, that he's a nerd. So, of course, now his expertise is going to be crucial, or potentially crucial, in them building these inventions to get the ball. Very true. And honestly, they're kind of invented for a kid. No, and I do appreciate that, like, with the exception of a couple of, like, really fully thought through, a lot of the stuff they've made isn't too far off of, like, a kid being like, what if we made a thing on my Kinects? I have so many Kinects. Oh, I know. I've done that. I built ghost traps as a kid because I was into ghost hunting. We trapped Santa Claus. So... Alright. So, like, yeah, like, the over-the-top engineering of something that honestly could have been solved by something very simple is, I think, a lot of fun. Yeah. It's fun because it's like, oh, they built all these in, like, an hour. Well, I mean, you got 9 of them, sure. Yeah, I guess maybe. With the willpower and determination of free will and free time, children can get a lot done. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that a bit. I also think most of this is definitely, like, the story being elaborated by Smalls. I think they probably tried, like, 2 things for a few hours, and then, like, gave up. I would kind of like to see maybe like a side story of Ham's
point of view. That would be good. That'd be interesting, honestly.
Yeah, him thinking he's the best out of that, because that's exactly how Ham would think of it.
I agree.
Yeah, but we get a little bit of narration with a dream prophecy.
I do love this dream prophecy because it is the most over-the-top caricature of the Babe of all time.
Yeah,
like they've got every like part that like made him like that icon. They got his cigar, they got the baseball bat, they've got like the whole he shows up in uniform with his hat and everything. Like, this is the silliest dream. I mean, it's played by Art LaFleur, who is the closest, at least from what I've seen, to someone playing Babe Ruth. He looks pretty good. Yeah, that paunchy, middle-aged New Yorker look. Yeah. Yeah, which is fascinating. Like, if that was the peak of baseball athletics back in the day. I wouldn't say peak. Babe just was very good at hitting a ball. Hey, peak. You don't have to, if you can get that out of the stadium, you don't have to run. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, Babe might also have a slight addiction to hot dogs. I feel like I tried dirty water dogs for the first time, and they are good. They are a whole nother level of your regular hot dog. Yeah. Babe had the same feelings to the point where he was eating them like mid-game. I mean, if you who's going to tell him no? Who's going to tell him no? Exactly. I do also appreciate how they work in a little bit of a genre from into this scene as well, where we get a little bit of a Western standoff with the dog and the ball, and yeah, it feels very much like the over-the-top storytelling beginning point, where it's like, so there was me, and there was the dog, and then I just went for it. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And I mean, of course, the dog's gonna get over and chase them. We get surf music because it's the 60s. That's the action scene. It is. It is okay. Mm-hmm. It's not, but it's also not the most memorable scene in the movie, and so I don't care. Yeah, I mean, there's fun point of view cameras as they're running by this movie theater. There's 2 werewolf movies on display. True. So really playing into, like, maybe these kids had seen a werewolf movie or they were conscious of this. They're definitely, like, overthinking it. They're like, oh my god, the dog is just chasing him. And it's like, yeah, because you have his toy. Yeah. He's not trying to get you, he's trying to get the ball. No, exactly. And also the fence crushing the dog is... It is a little sad because on multiple occasions people have, like, different commenters and critics felt that the scene of the dog being crushed by the fence did not go how they anticipated. They thought that the dog should either be comically, like, squished and, like, just disappear from the story, or death to the dog. And I get it a little bit, like, especially if you're watching this as, like, really putting yourself in the kid's point of view. Death to the dog does make a bit of sense. You would be defeating your enemy. The balls would be free. Yeah. But I like that we end up with the kind-hearted, like, oh no, let's just free him, and honestly the dog turns out to be so sweet and nice. Yeah, well, and I think that's what's great about that scene is it's the turning point of your childhood mentality. Yes. Where this is coming to the end of the Sandlot, where the big beast is not so big, your fears are dispelled. Yeah. So all these childhood things that you've built up are starting to dissolve. And they really break apart once they actually go to bring the doorbell to give the dog back, because you can't just leave him now. You have to confront this scary dog's owner. Yeah. And it turns out to be just a nice man. Yeah. Well, what's interesting about this is that the unknown is never ever what you expect it to be. Because, one, you don't know it. But it's also, like, when you think of, like, old Roman accounts, and probably where the werewolf legend came from is, there's men who are fighting who have beast heads. Scary. Terrifying. Yeah, dog-headed people have been in multiple folklore. So sure. It's just that they don't know what it is. Or, like, some people think that centaurs came from seeing people on horseback for the first time. Sure. I also think maybe a lot of people needed glasses back in the day. Probably. Yeah, you see some weird shit when you need glasses. Yeah, but I do appreciate that this reality really hitting them. And even though Smalls doesn't understand that the sweet old man, played by James Earl Jones... A delightful... little nod to those old enough to know who he was in the movie. Is offering him a better trade. A really better trade. Not even just, like, a little bit. This is a significantly better trade. Well, it's also a good way to set up a status of
now he has more people in his life who have baseball, because it's not just he's giving him the baseball, it's a trade of services.
Yes, you have to come talk to this old man.
Yeah, talk to me about baseball. And this is a man who's been around longer than his stepdad, so potentially we can infer that this is the man who installed the love of baseball in with him.
Sure. I also think this is like a really great like rehashing of like Home Alone, where in the end you find out that the scary old man was actually just a nice guy, and you believed the scary story, so you thought he was scary. They thought this guy's dog was terrifying. Turns out he's one of their heroes. Yeah. And they just never bothered to ask.
No, exactly. And it's a nice bittersweet, well, not bittersweet. It's a nice sweet ending because it's short-lived, but Smalls goes to give his dad the ball, tell him what happened, and he even calls him Dad. It
is a cute little scene.
Yeah, and we get the narration that they've all grown up and moved on from the game.
Yeah.
Small town is still the same. The dog is old as shit now. Benny moved on, but not everyone moved on, and Smalls will always be there with him.
I do like Squints. Where did he end up? Squints does end up getting and marrying Wendy, but it ends up with 9 kids, and he works at the drugstore.
You rabbit, Squints.
Yeah, and I think like they talk about how everybody goes on, and honestly, all of them like make sense, like to an extent, from the like little bits of caricature that we saw from them, and it's nice to know where they all are. But having it end on it going back to the 2 adults who meant the most to each other, Smalls and Benny, but they're at 2 different ends of the sports now. I think that's the best way to end.
Yeah, well, I mean, it ends up with a happy chewed up ball.
It does. Yeah.
The very expensive chewed up ball.
Yes.
So, and I mean, I think the Sandlot as a whole is very well written. I mean, everything that's written has a point. It comes back around. Even Wendy's little bit of, she's what keeps Squints in town.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I get the point of childhood fears and nostalgia. But I also completely understand from my point of view that it doesn't always work when viewed as an adult. And I think that's my biggest thing with this movie. While, yes, I do recognize technically it's a good movie, and there are aspects that I enjoyed, I think it's not really still my cup of tea. And that's fine.
I think that's fine. I think this is a movie that you are not the only one who this was not their cup of tea. So when this came out, it did do okay. It didn't do great when it first released to theaters, but it made its money back. It did all right, and it made enough to be profitable by the end of its run in theaters. Critics were not a huge fan of this.
Shocking.
I wouldn't say that they hated it, though. It was a pretty 50-50-ish split on whether or not they thought that this really captured the nostalgic factor of youth, which... honestly, like, how do you critique that? It's going to be different for everyone.
Well, I mean, think about it. A lot of critics in 93 probably grew up the same way these kids did.
And honestly, that's why I think, despite the critics not liking it, literally the moment it was, like, released, it was declared a cult classic and people fell in love. And that's because it was, like, the timing was very smartly done. They knew how old people were when they're going to be paying, like, who's going to be paying to see it. What's level of nostalgia, and, like, what time period do we set it in where, like, yes, it's set in the 60s, but, like, the 60s, because there's not much technology, because they're wearing pretty basic clothes, could be set anytime.
Which I will say, I think the clothing, from my understanding of fashion from the 60s, or outfits from the 60s, are pretty spot on, too.
They are. The big hat looks even more silly today just because we don't have anything that looks similar, but even that was... fairly accurate. It's a little exaggerated just to really emphasize how nerdy Smalls is, but not by a lot. So a lot of critics kind of like were hit and miss on whether or not they felt that nostalgia, and I think it depends on what type of kid you were, and like how you grew up, and I think that's okay.
No, and I completely get that. I mean, hell, my mom was surprised I had never saw this as a kid, and maybe I did, just it never stuck with me because I know I had a discussion with the lads, or a quick talk with them about kids' sports movies because I told them we were doing this. And I can see why this would be a good movie to introduce to your kids when they can kind of comprehend around like 5, maybe 6-ish.
Sure.
But like I know that like Jurassic Park was one of my childhood movies.
Sure. I mean, if you were a dinosaur kid, that was it. That was the movie.
I mean, I was a human kid, but...
Well, if you must be.
Yeah. No, that's the thing is, I grew up on Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Star Trek, old television shows. So, like,
sure.
my envisioning of a childhood movie is much different than a lot of people. I think the closest I would probably say to a childhood classic for me is Small Soldiers or Indian in the Cupboard. And I know Small Soldiers is not a good movie.
No, but Indian in the Cupboard's a good example. And I know Jurassic Park was originally meant for adults, but at this point in our world, Jurassic Park is, for a lot of people, their epitome of, children movie. Yeah. They knew it was scary. They didn't care. They loved dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So, I think it just depends on what type of kid you were. I wasn't a baseball boy. So, I watched The Sandlot growing up. I thought it was fine. I like a lot of the one-liners. They're part of our family's lexicon. My mom even got me a shirt with "You're killing me, Smalls" written real big on it.
And I finally understand "You're killing me, Smalls," what it means.
Yes. And, I love the one-liners, but it doesn't resonate with me. To me, this isn't a cult classic. But I do think that this is a weird cult classic. And I say that in a lot of the cult classics that we cover are cult classics because they hit a genre niche that isn't widely available. So people collect those movies, they rewatch them regularly, they decorate their homes with it, they will buy anything if it matches that theme. I think Labyrinth is a good example, right? There's not a ton, but it is a cult classic so hard that people revived the genre, right?
I mean, I completely understand that. I've wanted to try and cosplay Kakihara from Ichi the Killer. And
exactly.
I have actively sought out trying to find one of the barf bags from its premiere.
Yeah, there's a huge portion of the cult classic movies are things that people feel so connected with that they are rewatching it super regularly. They want collectibles from it. They want they want to be part of it in a way. The Sandlot is a cult classic, but for a different group of cult classic watchers. It is a cult classic for people who enjoy having it occasionally replay. Maybe twice a year sort of thing, at best. Most of the cult classic people who I found who, hands down are no, it's a cult classic, it's a great movie. And you ask, well, how often do you see it? Do you incorporate any Sandlot stuff? Do you want any fandom stuff? Do you want, a special DVD for the 30th anniversary? They're no, but I want my kids to watch it.
Yeah, I can see that. And I mean, I've had this talk with some of the lads as well because children are involved.
Sure.
But also just kids sports movies in general. I wonder if there's even going to be the next Sandlot. Not saying the remake of the Sandlot, but what is going to be that next childhood nostalgia of a sports movie? And
I think they will continue. Sports is a thing that universally has perpetuated throughout childhood for as long as sports have been around, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think it will look different because Sandlot, even though the Sandlot is still there and still open for kids to play, the sports that kids are just going out and playing are different than they were in the 60s or in the 90s. Soccer has become huge for if you're just going to be outside playing. Football is still the number one kids sport for just throwing a ball around. And while baseball is still a huge part, it looks different than the Sandlot makes it look. It's a lot... There's not a lot of that, just random kids getting together anymore. So I do think we will continue to have kids' sports films. I have no doubt about that. I think what they look like and what type of, relationship building and, character development they show, I think that's what's going to change.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Or maybe it won't change as much. Maybe it'll still be kind of that same nostalgic undertone of, hey, this is what it was like growing up, or...
Well, and that's the key, and that is why The Sandlot did so well. Because even though the critics weren't a huge fan, The Sandlot was made for the adults going to see it in theaters with their kids. Those adults loved it, passed that love on to their kids, and then those kids watched it, and they made their children watch it. And that is the cycle of The Sandlots. And so I think that the next, wave, we're not going to see today's children's movies coming soon. They're going to be, once we have grandkids level. Because we're going to have our nostalgia memories to force on the children. We will have our version of Sandlots. We're going to have a 90s Sandlot.
I'm banned from introducing movies to children.
I am aware that your tastes are maybe a little bit too spooky.
Yeah, I asked over the weekend if I could introduce one of them to Alien soon.
No.
As a joke, he is 2 years old, I understand.
Don't start with Alien, start with Home. That one's much more appropriate Alien children's movie.
What?
Home, it's very cute. It's about an alien trying to get home.
I don't know it.
Okay, well, you won't like it.
Alright. So, Chris, The Sandlot, what rating do you give it on the good, bad, weird scale?
Even though I'm not super passionate about it, I do think this is just a good movie for me. It's well written. The acting, despite them being little teenage brats, they did a great job. Everyone did fantastic. I wish there was more. I wish that the interviews that I managed to dig up were all in one place and part of the DVD, because I do think people had really cool things to say and good memories to share.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a good movie.
Yeah, I think I reflect that sentiment as well. I do think it is a solid movie. I don't think it's bad. The things I bitch and complain about are just my own personal things of, I know it's not a genre for me. I respect that they did a good job writing kids to make them feel fully like kids and not like adults trying to play kids.
Sure.
I mean, there's very dumb and awkward and cheesy moments,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also from a kid's point of view to try and hype up and ramp up what this is supposed to be.
Definitely.
Or what their experience was. So I get it. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it falls into that weird category at all. It's a solid, good movie for kids. I just recognize it's not for me.
Understandable.
So would you recommend this movie, though?
Yes, but not in the way that I normally passionately want to recommend something, or even just like want to recommend it but know that it's not for everyone. I think this is a good movie, and if you haven't watched it recently, it is fun to rewatch. If you haven't seen it, I think it could be worth a watch. It's a good family flick. It's very easy to watch with the parents or with kids. So I think it is worth a watch. Do I recommend going out of your way to, like, get a hold of this? No, especially with the DVD lacking in so many features, especially for how old this movie and how loved this movie is. That's super disappointing to me, and I think it does bring the, like, score down a bit, but I know this movie makes its rounds on the TV, like, movie watching, like, if you're scrolling around. I know it shows up every once in a while. Mm-hmm. I think that's the perfect place to watch it. If it's free on Netflix one day, put it on.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't think I could wholeheartedly recommend this movie to an adult.
Sure.
Because usually if I'm recommending this movie, it's someone who's already seen it.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people have.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so, even for a kid's movie, I don't know if I could recommend it for kids to watch. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I get it, it's meant for kids. But if I was to ever have kids, it would be a whole different realm of films that
sure
they would be in. I would make them watch, because I guess, I don't know, maybe that's just me projecting my own childhood onto other kids, but it's just, I don't know, it's one of those movies that I don't think, unless the kid's really into baseball, it'd be hard to get them to sit down and watch. And so I don't know if I could recommend it being set so far back as well either. I mean, don't get me wrong.
It is aged, yeah.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of relatable relations and it's stuff that goes on between the characters, but
it would be a hard sell to just the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd have to get the family together to, like, sit down and watch it.
Exactly.
I get it.
Recommend as a family movie, not as an individual watch for one or the other.
Totally understand that.
But now is the time of the show, Season 6 Bingo. New season and a new game. Chris and I are playing Bingo, and you can too. Rules for the game are simple, 1 stamp per card per episode. Cards can be found on our socials at TGTBTW_podcast on Instagram, and threads at TGTBTW podcast on Twitter, or you are free to email your requests to TGTBTWpodcast@gmail.com. You can use any of the 3 bingo card variations, but each stamp must be associated with an episode of Season 6. First place is no longer an option. My cousin won that one.
Congratulations.
Second place gets to choose a deep dive and 1 microview. Third place gets to choose 2 microviews. And fourth and fifth place get to choose a microview apiece. So feel free to share at us on social media or email us for participation. Rules are slightly different for Chris and myself. We only get 2 stamps per deep dive. First to get to bingo in either of the categories of good, bad, or weird gets to choose a movie that they feel fits that category for Season 7. So Chris, what do you got for bingo?
My first one. The obvious choice for this on my good card is memorable one-liners.
Fair. Killing Me Smalls is probably the best one.
It is, but there are many in this movie, and I know everyone's got their favorite, and they say it regularly, so I will honor that with that space. And for my number 8, I'm going to stretch it just a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to go on my weird card for drugs, because that's the only way to open your mind. But it's the only way to become a man.
I mean, it opens them that drugs are bad.
It does, and it opens their gut to puke.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with bad humor for this one for me, because Well, I get it. It's not my kind of humor to begin with, so...
Sure.
I just can't... Or wait, do I go with that one? Or actually, I'm going to go with something else, because I can understand the humor being acceptable to people. It's just not bad. Sure. I'm going to go with product placement of the Coca-Cola everywhere.
You took my third option. Totally understand. It does make Coca-Cola look delightful and crispy.
Yeah. And then for good, I think I'm going to go with, and it's how appropriate for a child's movie, tits for the down the shot of Wendy, Petalberg or whatever the fuck her name is.
Wendy the lifeguard.
Yes.
Understandable.
But yeah, so summer's over. Well, summer's not fully over, but
we're wrapping it up.
I may have been okay with the summer as the end for summertime, but I am quite excited for our actual September block of episodes that we have planned.
I am too.
It's going to be a bit of a pre-game for Folktober, so get ready for that. So now we have pre-game and also a second year of Folktober this year, so look forward to that.
Get ready for spooky season.
Ooh, we're getting there soonish, kind of, I guess.
We're working our way into it. We're going to ease our way into the spooky pool.
Yeah, more child-friendly up front instead of doing one in the middle of October like we normally do.
Very true.
So, but anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Peace! Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always, check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace!